At Kroger Pharmacy, care is what's most convenient for you. Care is being here when you need us. We're open evenings and weekends. Care is helping you save more. Most insurance plans and discount cards are accepted at your local Kroger Pharmacy. Care is saving you time by managing your prescriptions online. You can request refills, check order status, and more. Care is convenience that works for everyone. Kroger Health, a world of care is in store. Services and availability vary by location. Age and other restrictions may apply. For coverage, consult your health insurance company. Visit the pharmacy or our site for details.
Stay warm and save every day. All in the Kroger app. Get 10 for $10 on select varieties of Kroger pasta, Starkist tuna pouches, or Powerade. Then get flavorful fresh Heritage Farm chicken split breasts, drumsticks, or thighs for $1.49 a pound, all with your card. Shop these deals at your local Kroger, less than 5 miles away. Or tap the screen now to download the Kroger app to save big today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 92. Should you question evidence-based medicine? Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hi there, and welcome to another episode. So happy you're here today. I hope you're having a great day so far and that you're listening to this while you get something important accomplished. Have you thought any differently about your big get this past week? Have you noticed big get messages all around us? Have you gone so far as to accept that you'll never be exonerated from pain, uncertainty, and hard work? And how happiness and success come as a byproduct of accepting pain as you stick to your values? Today, we're going to talk about why evidence-based medicine is failing you and all of America. I don't like to be a Debbie Downer, but I think it's important for you to know and understand so that you better know how to make your own choices and so that you don't feel torn between the different views of medicine. You can be Switzerland. Evidence-based medicine as it is now is not the blanket of starlight that it's purported to be. But that doesn't mean that rejecting all drugs or modern advancements is in any way wise. Switzerland is the third happiest country in the world and the number one most innovative country in the world. Staying neutral is possible and it has its advantages. I hope that understanding what most people, including most doctors, don't understand will help prepare you to be different and age like a professional. Overall, 20% of a population's health is determined by medical care. 80% by external factors. I don't know if anyone could or has ever tried to put a number on it, but I think individually it would be more like 90-10. 90% or more of your health is determined by your habits, your environment, your mindset, and your lifestyle. Society-wide, those things all matter, plus what emphasis is placed on prevention, who has access to an environment where healthy options are actually accessible to them, and everyone's mindset. Everything we see, hear, and read reinforces the idea that the way to improve our health is via technological innovation. We just need to keep spending all of our resources searching for that one magic pill, the quick fix, the big get, if you will. Technological innovation is awesome, but expecting something outside of ourselves to swoop in and save us from all of our problems is a very poor strategy. It's a piece of the puzzle, but not the biggest one. The fact that we're all conditioned to believe differently is the problem. Almost all doctors and other medical providers are good people who want to do right by their patients. They want to provide the highest care possible and see their patients thrive. They endured years of grueling training to develop the necessary skills to be a high-level, learned intermediary who can guide their patients to good decision based on the best available data. Obviously, medicine has changed a lot over the centuries, but just since the 1990s, a big shift was made from expertise-based medicine to evidence-based medicine. I was in pharmacy school from 2000 to 2004, and it was all about evidence-based medicine, evidence-based recommendations. Anyone who wanted to try anything without being able to regurgitate citations for studies to show that it worked was a quack, and peer-reviewed journal articles were the end-all be-all. I'm sure you probably know this, but peer-reviewed medical journals are reputable publications where articles about studies are reviewed by other medical professionals to look for biases or any other study flaws, validate or disprove the findings, and spread the word to the medical community about what is proven to work for patients. It's prestigious to be a published clinician. Some of the top medical journals are the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, the British Medical Journal, and the Lancet. The gold standard for a trial is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial where the new treatment is compared to placebo and neither the patient nor the researcher knows whether the patient is getting the study drug or the placebo. The ultimate evidence is a meta-analysis, which is a study of a collection of studies that evaluates all of the different data on the same subject together to see trends. Clinical guidelines are created by medical associations like the American College of Cardiology or the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Clinical guidelines are super important standards for determining how to best treat your patients. They affect whether you'll get paid by your patient's insurance company and protect you from getting sued for malpractice. Most of this information in today's episode is from a book called Sickening by Dr. John Abramson. If you find it interesting and want to learn more about the history of how all of this happened and the details of specific things certain companies did, I highly recommend his book. I learned a lot of things I didn't know before, and he does a great job of laying out all the information in a logical way. He says that as of 2019, the US was 68th in the world for healthy life expectancy, or years lived in good health. 68th. But we're number one in spending by a long shot. He has some crazy charts in the book that show health versus spending, and it's not good. The only countries in the world where pre-pandemic healthy life expectancy decreased since 2011 were the US, Syria, Yemen, and Venezuela. All other countries in the world had an increase in healthy life expectancy. Not us. In 2017, the US ranked 26th in the world for mortality from heart attacks. The United States spends an excess of $1.5 trillion a year on healthcare compared to other wealthy countries. Not $1.5 trillion total, but an excess $1.5 trillion. Like, we're throwing that money down the drain. That down the drain money is 2 times the annual budget for the Department of Defense. In 1980, the U.S. was also the number one spender, spending 8.2% of its GDP on healthcare, almost the same as the number 2 spender, which was Germany. That's about 1.7% above the average of 10 comparable countries. By 2019, American healthcare spending was 17.7% of GDP, 7% more than the average of 10 wealthy countries. That's insane. $1.5 trillion down the drain. In 1980, the U.S. adjusted death rate was better than the average of the other wealthy countries. We had 88,000 fewer deaths per year than they did. By 2017, despite our out-of-control spending, 488,000 more Americans were dying per year than in other wealthy countries. 488,000 people per year dying due to poor health care is 1,300 more deaths per day than the population-based averages in other countries. That is similar to the shocking daily pandemic death rates, but nobody seems to care. Brand name oral drug prices increased 6 times faster than inflation, and injectables 10 times faster. Drug companies charge more in the US than anywhere else in the world because they can. We don't have a program to regulate drug prices or one to determine whether new drugs provide any additional benefit over currently available treatments. Hey, have you ever thought about buying an Oura ring? If you have, then you know that you can track your activity, recovery, and sleep with a light and unobtrusive ring that looks like a normal ring. I've had mine for almost 3 years and I absolutely love it. I check my numbers every single day and it helps me make better decisions. You can see real metrics that show the detrimental effects of eating too late or working out too hard too often, and the beneficial effects of balanced activity and turning off screens before bed. If you're a curious person who wants to see how much deep sleep you got, which is critical for muscle building, the Oura Ring can tell you whether you get the 75 to 90 plus minutes that you need for that. If you want to see if you got enough REM for emotional resilience, memory consolidation, and neurotransmitter production, your Oura Ring can tell you whether you got the 2+ hours that you need for that. I pay special attention to my HRV, which shows me how stressed my body is, and I always check my steps every day to make sure I've gotten enough non-exercise movement throughout the day. You can quickly check your heart rate, track your cycle. It connects the dots and knows why your basal body temperature increases for a day or two and uses that to predict your next period start date. You can see your sleep efficiency, which is a high leverage thing you can optimize for, and tag for things you might want to track like caffeine, fasting, sauna, melatonin, headaches, whatever. And it gives you monthly and quarterly reports. If getting more health data from an easy wearable has been on your mind, now might be the time to act. I have a link in the show notes that will get you $50 off. They make it super easy to find your perfect size and get started right away. Okay, back to the episode. 60 years ago, one vial of insulin cost 84 cents, which is $7.44 in today's dollars. When Eli Lilly first launched Humalog in 1996, it was $21 a vial. From 2012 to 2018, Lilly raised the price by 18% per year. By May of 2017, one vial of Humalog costs $330. In 2019, 1 year of therapy with insulin from vials costs $5,224. Most people use pens now, though, and those cost more. I thought I was already pretty cynical about drug companies, but this is one area that I learned from the book where I had been completely duped, just like everyone else. I could talk about it for a really long time, but I'll try to give you a super mini version. If you're interested in all the details, read the book. It's really good. If you're interested in a Cliff's Note version, send me a message and I'd be happy to give you a better rundown of this. I graduated from pharmacy school in 2004 and I was a counselor at a diabetes camp, did an endocrinology rotation, felt like I was pretty clued in about diabetes and insulin. People used to use recombinant insulins like Humulin R or N or 7030. I knew that newer insulin analogs like Humalog and Lantus worked better than the older recombinant insulins because they better mimicked normal insulin secretion from the pancreas. You could get a little tighter glucose control with them, etc. But it turns out that's not true. It's just what insulin makers Eli Lilly, Sanofi Aventis, and Novo Nordisk decided they wanted everyone to believe. So we did. It's insane. Actual trial data shows that the newer insulins provide a slight but not clinically significant improvement in type 1 diabetic patients, but no improvement at all in type 2 diabetics. In fact, years of patient outreach and drug companies directly paying doctors per patient for getting type 2 diabetic patients under, air quote, tight control with newer insulins actually increased risk of death by 22% and caused 3 times more serious complications in type 2 diabetics. But 90% of insulin in the US is prescribed for type 2 diabetics, not type 1. So it was jumbo important for these 3 drug companies to get type 2 diabetic patients on the newer insulin analogs rather than the older recombinant insulin. So they did. Now we spend 11 times more per year for no improvement at all in outcomes of type 2 diabetic patients. The UK, New Zealand, Canada, and Germany were not fooled, so they treat their type 2 diabetics with the equally effective and possibly more safe but 11 times cheaper recombinant insulins. Revenue isn't just from a high price, but from the volume of prescriptions written. The primary job of drug companies is to maximize their profits by shaping doctors' beliefs. This means drug companies need to convince doctors that their new drugs are in their patients' best interest. The majority of large drug companies spend twice as much money on marketing as they do on research and development. 1/4 of those companies spend 10 times as much on marketing. 10 times! They'll go around saying they have to charge high prices because the research and development costs are just so high, but they'll happily spend 10 times that much marketing their drug that likely doesn't even provide any clinical benefit to anyone. Some drugs absolutely do. We need new antibiotics that could clear vancomycin-resistant bacterial infections. Some innovations are groundbreaking and they deserve to be celebrated. Research is important. We know that doctors are taught to acquire their knowledge about optimal patient care from studies published in peer-reviewed journals, meta-analyses of those studies, and professional guidelines. As Dr. Abramson puts it in his book, a doctor's fundamental act as a consumer is not in the decision to write a specific prescription for a specific patient. More precisely, it's the decision to accept that industry's, quote, scientific evidence about a drug or device fulfills his or her criteria for personal adoption of a professional belief. Doctors decide whether new information merits being accepted as knowledge and is therefore worthy of being integrated into their repertoire of optimal patient care. End quote. Today, 6 out of 7 clinical trials are commercially funded. 71% of clinical guideline chairs and 90% of co-chairs have relevant financial ties to drug companies. A study of 91 cancer treatment guidelines showed that when a guideline author had a financial tie to a particular drug, the guidelines were 7 times more likely to recommend its use. It's no surprise that when a drug company funds the trials for its own drug, the data miraculously shows that it's a great drug that should be recommended to everyone. The book goes through some of the ways researchers do this. There are a lot of them, like dentists in Utah where I live, or soda shops. Enough already. There are so many researchers can make their studies show positive results. I'll spare you the laundry list, just know that it's extensive and alarming. But if the data has to be peer-reviewed before publication and evaluated by the FDA and so forth, aren't there checks and balances? Here's what I didn't know before. Clinical trial data belongs to the drug company, and they don't let anyone, even the academic authors of the study, actually see the raw data. Yeah, the academic authors of the study are not allowed to see the raw data of the study they're signing their names to. The peer reviewers and guideline makers also see absolutely zero actual data. That's crazy. 39% of clinical trials allow the authors access to the underlying data. 61% of authors aren't allowed to check the accuracy of the results of their own studies. Partnerships allow drug companies to ghostwrite manuscripts and relegate named authors to the position of suggesting revisions. Doctor researchers don't push back because they don't want to risk being excluded from the financial and status reward of participation in clinical research. These partnerships benefit both the drug company and the doctor who's out to make a buck, but JAMA deputy editor Drummond Rennie calls it, quote, a race to the ethical bottom. A statistical evaluation showed that 3% of all published meta-analyses are methodologically decent and clinically useful. 3%. That means 97% of meta-analyses are useless noise. There is a massive production of unnecessary and misleading systemic reviews that serve mostly as easily producible, publishable marketing tools. They don't help doctors or patients in any way. There are some crazy stories in the book, like of a Japanese pediatrician questioning a prestigious Cochrane review guideline based on a meta-analysis of 10 studies about the effectiveness of Tamiflu for the flu. It turns out that 8 out of those 10 studies in the meta-analysis had never even been published. So all of those supposed results in the study couldn't even be fake evaluated the way published study data can be. High-level guidelines were being published based on meta-analyses of studies that weren't even real. 4 of the 6 study authors were Roche employees. So, why do respectable medical journals allow their good reputation to be used to certify the results of clinical trials when actual data have not even been made available to the editors or the peer reviewers for analysis? Dr. Richard Smith, editor-in-chief of the British Medical Journal, said it took him 25 years to wake up to what was really happening. which is that medical journals have a strong secret incentive to push articles that reflect favorably on brand name drugs, because this is something I also had no idea about before. The drug makers then purchase reprints of the articles to use as marketing tools. I've seen those articles a ton of times. Drug reps pass out these purchased reprints to health professionals, which spread the journal's good name and also adds to the profitability of the journal. Okay, is that a big deal? Well, reprints have at least an 80% profit margin. In 2005, 41% of the Lancet's total income came from the purchase of reprints. In 2012, 88 high reprint sales articles brought in $455,000 each, earning the Lancet $31.7 million in 1 year from reprints. So if you earn $455,000 each time you print a pro new drug article, you bet you want to print as many of those articles as you can. Does anyone have any scruples anymore? Isn't there anyone anywhere who cares about the actual health of patients? Turns out that in September of 2001, editors of 12 of the world's most influential medical journals, including JAMA, the New England Journal of Medicine, and the Lancet, all got together and wrote an unprecedented joint statement warning the public that the validity of clinical trial reports was being threatened by commercial influence and making a mockery of science. This was 22 years ago in 2001, when the evil was really just starting to get rolling. The editors explained how investigators have little or no input into trial design, no access to the raw data, and limited participation in its interpretation, which makes medical journals party to medical misrepresentation. It was a big deal. The only problem with the release of this huge announcement to national news outlets that could have changed the entire trajectory of evidence-based medicine in the United States was that another news story came along and got more airtime on September 11th, 2001. What? Can you believe that? It seems unreal that it could be that coincidental, but that's what happened. And so nothing changed. There are all kinds of other problems like pharmacy benefit managers or PBMs who get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies for including certain drugs on their formularies. PBMs are terrible, horrible, no good, very bad businesses. I love you enough to respect your time and just leave it at that. Just know that you can consider them cotton-headed ninny-mugginses. But another major problem is that the FDA requires a drug to be safe and effective to be approved based on the data that they can't actually look at. But it doesn't require any kind of comparison to the best available therapy. Devices require even less evidence. It's actually kind of unbelievable. Anyway, so positive results from a clinical trial might show that it's statistically better than placebo, but they don't have to provide any evidence that it's superior to the current treatment, which is silly because the real choice isn't start this new $72,000 a year drug or do nothing. It's start this new $72,000 a year drug or use the current $400 a year drug. Those are the actual numbers for Humira versus methotrexate. Humira is better than placebo, but it's not better than methotrexate. But it's used way, way more often because the makers know exactly how to manipulate the medical practice. And we're all paying that price tag in one way or another. And none of this even considers comparing the price of treatment with drug versus lifestyle changes. An awesome coach would cost way less than most drugs, and the results last a lifetime. And paying a coach ahead of time to prevent the development of a serious condition that needs treatment at all is so exponentially more intelligent. Drug companies do all kinds of underhanded things when marketing their drugs, blatantly lying to doctors and more. There is all kinds of evidence in the book about this. The result is that if they're found guilty, nobody goes to jail and the fine they have to pay is worth it, considering the enormous profits they make from the public up until they're forced to cease and desist. It's actually part of their strategy. They do it on purpose. Between 1991 and 2017, drug companies paid more than $38 billion in fines and settlements, many of which involved pleading guilty to having misled doctors and the public about drug safety and efficacy. GlaxoSmithKline has paid the most overall at $7.9 billion in fines, and Pfizer has the largest single criminal fine ever imposed on a corporation, which was $1.195 billion in a single case. But Nobody went to jail, and the records all remain sealed as part of the settlement, so nobody can know the details of what they did. There's no incentive for them to stop because it's working for them. I know that not all of this is news to you, but I hope you've learned something useful and that you have a little bit better understanding of the way the machine of medicine is set up to run so that it can help you make better decisions for yourself. Doctors want to provide the best care they can to their patients, so they rely on evidence from clinical trials published in medical journals to guide their decisions. Some of that information is accurate and complete, but at least 5/6 of clinical research is funded by pharmaceutical companies, and they're really good at making sure that the raw data isn't available to clinical researchers, peer reviewers, or guideline makers. These people don't know what they don't know, and I love what Dr. Abramson says in his book. Evidence without data isn't actually evidence. New innovations are very much needed, but only about 1 in 8 new drugs actually advances medical care. That one drug a year is awesome. The rest is just needless, costly noise, except the few new drugs that actually cause more harm than good, like Vioxx. According to Dr. Abramson, of the $121 billion spent in the US on medical research, 96%, $116 billion, is spent on developing and testing new drugs and medical devices. The remaining 4% is spent on researching effectiveness, efficiency, and how to improve actual health and well-being. We know that if we want to see where someone's values lie, we just need to follow where their money goes. It is true in this case. We can see that even though there are good people with good intentions practicing medicine and doing medical research and even working for pharmaceutical companies, the primary purpose of American healthcare is not providing the most effective and appropriate patient care. It's maximizing corporate profits. A great quote from Richard Horton, editor-in-chief of The Lancet, says, "The case against biomedical science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. Science has taken a turn toward darkness." End quote. My hope is that if at any time in the future you start getting bullied or shamed into a medical choice that doesn't feel right to you based on the holiness of evidence-based medicine, you can remember that underlying data from clinical trials are often not available to any of the clinicians involved, and that evidence without data is not really evidence. You're not ridiculous or stupid or crazy for questioning the science or commonly accepted standard guidelines. Some of it is right, and listening to scientific reasoning is a wise thing to do. But you need to do what's best for you, which is often something not at all cut and dry. Good thing you're so smart. Next week, we're going to talk about upgrading your health through behavior design. Until then, know that some evidence lacks data, and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.